Imagine
A podcast.
where time drifts slowly,
A podcast.
Where
Isaac.
carries you away.
So let me be clear. We tortured some folks.
So let me start by thanking my most incredible husband, Doug. And America, we must also be steadfast in advancing our security and values abroad. As Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most
lethal fighting force in the world.
And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice.
Did you notice how her voice changed when she started talking about the army? Thank you, Dougie. Thank you. The most lethal army in the history of mankind. She freaked me out a little bit, not gonna lie. The DNC did not make it any harder for me to not vote for Kamala Harris for president for 2024. They didn't give a shit. They didn't there was no reaching across the aisle towards the quote unquote left or whatever the hell I am. No, there was just Blut and Honor, right? There was the democratic descent into corporate fascism. I've been pissing a lot of people off with some of the stuff I've been saying about how I'm not going to vote for Kamala. And I have the luxury of not having to because I'm in Florida. And it's not that I don't vote. I vote. I vote in special elections. I vote every chance I get. In fact, I came back from Maine and New York in time to vote in the Florida primaries. And I voted for tax collector, you know? If you don't know who your local representatives are, even like your local charter board, planning board, city commission, mayor, comptroller, tax collector, don't talk to me. Don't tell me who to vote for, because that's the shit that does really matter. Kamala is now saying in her most recent campaign ad, brat that wall.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Her latest campaign ad to demonize immigrants further than they already are demonized in this country is to use literal footage of Trump's wall. So when people try to make the distinction, the difference between the Republicans and Democrats, between Trump and Kamala, they're not doing themselves any favors. It gets harder and harder and harder. But it's not November yet, so maybe somebody can change my mind. And so on today's episode, I'm joined by 3 guests, which is a lot, I know. One of them, returning guest Ryan Ray, who's the head of the Leon County Democrats, makes the case for voting for Kamala. And my other 2 guests, Mike Preisner and Sean McCarthy, make the case against not make the case to not vote for Kamala. It's a spirited debate. Poor Ryan had to be put in that position. defending the indefensible. I am seeing a shift in the political landscape, and it's who's the most annoying. It used to be the Republicans were intolerable. It seemed like not that long ago, was it like July 5th or whatever, the assassination attempt? Everyone was saying, Trump's it. It's over. It's over. He won. I think Trump and his campaign believed that too. That's why they fucked up and picked J.D. Vance, and now they're tanking. But it could all change, and it has. Kamala is ahead by all measures. That also makes Democrats the most annoying people in the world now. The excitement, you should not be this excited for these candidates. It's not that you shouldn't be excited for certain figures who are enacting actual change, but the disgusting display of celebrity sycophancy at the DNC, I find it appalling and distasteful considering all that's going on in the world. Not just in Gaza, which again is indefensible, and it is Kamala's administration that's doing this. As of today, there is no distinction between the Biden administration and Kamala Harris. It's the same thing. They don't even have their policies up on the Walz Harris campaign page. So give me a break. And the actual international crimes being committed by the Biden administration at the border. We are not following the rules, our own rules, in fact. It is illegal what we are doing there by refusing asylum to refugees. So, yeah, forgive me if I don't get all excited about Brat Kamala or whatever the fuck. And again, the behavior, the twerking, the dancing at the DNC, it's just it's trite now to talk about, gay colored drone bombs. So I don't know. I it's still not November. Something could change. Kamala could enact an arms embargo on Israel, and I would actually consider voting for her if that was one of her policies. And that would make sense when you think about it. If electability is what they're trying to do, if they are trying to win the White House, the least popular policy of the Biden administration is the way it's handling Israel. So you'd think that, if we want to win, we should do what the people want, which is, at bare minimum, a ceasefire. Stop giving Israel blank checks worth billions of dollars for them to commit war crimes. They won't even do that. So, that's great. That's great news. Normally this is the time when I would ask you guys to like and subscribe to my Patreon, etc., etc., but I'm going to do something a little different today. If you refuse to pay for this show, you can do me a bigger solid. And it's not for me, actually. It's for my friend Tanner Masseth, who is currently facing up to 7 years in prison in Chicago for his protests at the DNC. There's actually a video of it. I'll put a link in the page where he splashes a cop with an Aquafina water bottle. This is all hypothetical, by the way, alleged. And then throws the empty water bottle and it hits the fence. He was subsequently arrested and is facing serious charges right now. And he doesn't deserve it. He actually faces the harshest charges of the 70-plus people who were arrested that day, some of whom carried loaded weapons with them. And they got less severe charges than poor old Tanner. So what you can do for me and for Tanner, who's a good boy, is you can call Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx and demand drop the charges against all of the DNC protesters. So not just Tanner, all 70 plus who were arrested. I'll put the numbers in the link below. Again, if you're not going to pay for this, this is the least you can do. It'll take you 30 seconds. It's nothing. And there's a script you'll follow. You just call, leave a message. You say, I am calling to demand that all charges brought against protesters during the Democratic National Convention be dropped immediately. Easy peasy, more effective than voting, probably.
Came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. In the little streets of Belfast, in the dark of early morn, British soldiers came running, breaking little homes with scorn. Hear the sobs of crying children, dragging fathers from their bed. Watch the scene as helpless mothers watch the
yeah, so we've talked about the weather, and let's get started and let's talk about the weather in hell, which is America. And on today's episode of Coexist Incorporated, I'm joined by 3 guests. We're going to be debating whether or not you should vote for Kamala for president. To start us off, we have Ryan Ray, a returning guest who is in the unenviable position of having to make the case for voting for Democrats this November. Also joined by activist Mike Preisner, who will be taking the opposing view, as well as Sean McCarthy, who, we're just going to be ganging up on you, Ryan. I'm sorry about
great.
that.
Can't wait.
So just so everyone knows whose voices are whose, why don't you guys just do a little brief introduction and tell us what you do and where you're at.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ryan Ray. I am the chair of the Leon County Democratic Party here in the state capital of Florida. I've always been known as a progressive, reformist voice within the party. A long time, always been a thorn in the side establishment. Really proud of my work here locally. I work for city commissioner here as well at City Hall in Tallahassee, and we have really been effectively throwing the money changers out, throwing out the Chamber of Commerce Republican-oriented establishment, and bringing the voices of everyday people and our neighborhoods to our local government. And so that's kind of my experience. What I bring there, I'm a former journalist, used to cover state capitol, used to work for the party as an apparatchik in the state party doing communications. And I'm really glad to be here with y'all today.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you for your service. Next, we have Sean. Sean, what's up?
Hey, yeah, I'm Sean McCarthy. I don't really do much. I just complain on the internet. I'm on Twitter at SeanMcCarthy.com. I'm also co-host of the Out for Smokes podcast, patreon.com/outforsmokes. You can sign up for free. But yeah, I don't like the Democrats.
I actually fanboyed Sean last year on the New York City subway. I recognized him and came up to him and like, "Are you Sean McCarthy?" Because when you were on the show Grub Stickers, that was like one of my favorite podcasts for quite some time, and one of the few podcasts I actually paid for. So I think, Sean, have you been recognized in public before like that? Was that embarrassing for you, as it was for me?
Yeah, you know, it happens. I think the fantasy of how my life is going to end is someone on the subway comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you Sean McCarthy?" And those are the last words I ever hear.
Well,
but
it ain't gonna be me unless you're an asshole to me on this show. We'll see.
Yes. Most people are nice.
Yeah, most people are nice. That is true about the world. Unless you're Israeli, in which case, not so much. Next up, we have Mike. Mike, say hi.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Yeah, I mean, I guess my main background is like in the anti-war movement. You know, I got involved in the anti-Iraq war struggle under Bush. I kind of when I was still in the Army in 2005. And then, yeah, that was kind of the next long stretch of my life until 2015. I kind of also at the same time started a media project with my partner Abby called The Empire Files. And so since 2015, we've done, you know, a podcast and video series since then. We made our first feature film in 2019 about Gaza called Gaza Fights for Freedom. And we're working on our second feature film project now, which is why we're not doing as much video and podcast content at the moment, because we're trying to get over the finish line of that next big project. So yeah, I'm not as tapped into the world of the DNC and electoral politics as I once was, which has also been nice. But you know, I'm seeing enough peripherally, I guess, to have some opinions about it.
And yeah, Mike, also a fellow Florida man. And I actually started checking out your stuff when I was obsessed with Ron DeSantis and his Guantanamo Bay past. And you were the one to release that interview with Adeyafi, I think that's how you say his name.
Mansour Dafi, yeah.
Yeah, and that like I've been a fan of yours ever since then. So I'm a fan of everybody here, even if we might not all 100% agree, although I think like pretty close to agreeing. Uh, I guess I want to start off by asking everybody, did you vote for Obama? And I'll start by saying, yes, I did. 2008 was my first election that I could vote in, and I uh, not so happily. I wasn't really into politics at that point as a freshman in college, but I did, and it felt good at the time. So, did you all also vote for Obama?
I was I think registered with a minor party and switched to the Democratic Party to vote for Obama over Hillary in the primary in 2008. I did vote for Obama. I felt the excitement and the disappointment that a lot of other people did around that, and I worked on his campaign in 2012 as well.
I actually campaigned against Obama for a third-party candidate named Gloria La Riva in 2008. So I'm a little older than you guys.
Bona fides. Are you a Gen Xer?
I graduated high school in like 2001, so I think I'm not.
Okay, just making sure. I have a policy of no Gen Xers on the show.
Right, no, I don't violate that.
Sean.
Yeah, it's even more embarrassing. I voted for Hillary in 2016. But,
I did too. So, guilty.
Obama twice, Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, like, what else were you gonna do at that time? I guess vote for McCain. But so Mike, it sounds like you were ahead of us in the left department way back when. What were you ever a Democrat?
Oh no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I was like, I guess, very into John Kerry in the 2004 election. And I was in high school, but I was really following and was like a Gore guy in the 2000 election. But, I feel like I was always kind of like progressive on social issues. To me, the Democratic Party was like the most left thing that existed or whatever. But I think just, I was kind of a product of the Bush era, which, there was a huge surging anti-war movement. There's a lot of political struggle at the time. And that's kind of, what it was able to reach me and took me away from just the idea that electoral politics is the only thing that really matters. I was inspired by the hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and that's what kind of pulled me into a more radical space. And so I think we're seeing that now having a huge impact on people with the Gaza movement, of course.
And I guess my next question for everybody is, are you going to vote for Kamala or vote at all come November?
Well, isn't there only like 3 states where it matters this election, or like what is the? There's really only a relevant question if you live in one of the like 3 states, right?
What states are those? Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Michigan, Arizona. Is that it? Pretty much. North Carolina. I don't know. They seem to be kind of up for play.
Well, I think I've learned the most important part of voting in New York is you actually get a good high-quality pen out of it. The stickers are kind of mediocre, but the pen actually, I keep my voting pens, they'll last at least a year or 2. And that's worth the 5 minutes it takes to show up and bubble in Jill Stein.
Classic Tammany Hall patronage.
I will say that, the DNC did get me fired up to vote for Kamala. I mean, Lil Jon was there.
Georgia, how do you cast your vote?
Yeah! Turn out for what?
I mean, we've all partied to Lil Jon, of course.
Yeah.
When my now home state of Oregon was called on to cast their delegate vote, they played "Float On" by Modest Mouse, which is such a cool song. And special guest Leon Panetta. I mean, who doesn't love a former CIA director and Secretary of Defense who's now like 90 years old? And so that was very exciting for me. And so I found it very relatable, Game of Thrones references, all that stuff. The vibes were great.
Yeah, a lot of...
I'm stoked to Pokemon Go to the polls. And yes, I'm also, yes, it's true. The rumors are true. I'm also just chilling in Cedar Rapids. And yeah, no, I will be pulling the lever for Kamala Harris for president here in Tallahassee.
Um, I I'm undecided. I'm one of the few undecided voters that they're trying to reach for here. And maybe by the end of the show, we'll figure out if one of you, if Ryan can convince me to vote for Kamala, because I held my nose last election cycle and voted for Biden, which I'm not proud of. And I voted for Hillary in 2016. And I just like, I really like, it made me sick to my stomach each time having to do it. And so it's going to take a lot of convincing uh, in order for me to do that again. And like the kind of penance I will need to do, the self-flagellating after bubbling in Kamala, or I might just write in Ralph Nader. I'm not sure. Um, but hopefully Mike and Sean can pull me in the other way and make it feel like it's okay for me not to vote for Kamala. So uh Ryan, as the lone Kamala beehive person here, K Hive, right? Not beehive, K Hive.
Yes.
Why should you vote for Kamala Harris?
Well, let's just get it all out there to begin with. I think a chief virtue of the Democratic Party is it's probably the only vehicle for mass political participation that's not the Republican Party. And I think that's a pretty big virtue. I think it's a place where opinions like all of these are respected and are where progress is possible on all the issues. I'll tell y'all, I mean, I kind of cut my teeth and learned a lot about my political orientation watching an independent House member, Bernie Sanders, making to me one of the few people that made sense on the House floor on C-SPAN, um, arguing against the war in Iraq. And that was convincing to me then, and it's been proven even more true today. So that's where I come from. I think that movements like anti-war movements, like social justice movements, are stronger when there's Democrats in power. I understand that reasonable people can differ on that. I've always seen that the breathing room that is allowed and the discourse is in a better position. I would say that none of the issues that we all care about will be improved by having Donald Trump in the White House. So, yeah, just to begin with, I will say that.
I mean, it's sort of the same thing you've heard every year, and it was easier in other years to buy into it. I mean, going back to the 90s, just sort of, oh, the Republicans are terrible. Well, of course they're terrible, but I don't know. I mean, this year in particular, with everything that's happened in Gaza, there's an extent to which I can sort of hold my nose and understand people voting Democrat in a swing state or, these sorts of things. But Gaza is something where it's worse than the Iraq War, which is a crazy thing to say, but I do believe that. I mean, it's a mass murder of people who are trapped in a prison, just indiscriminate, women and children. There's at least 6 figures dead. I think it's pretty high, and it's just, I'm more sympathetic than most to kind of social democratic reformism, but when you're tying it up with this straight up satanic evil project that Israel is committed itself to right now, I just don't think I don't think it's forgivable, and I think ultimately you kind of discredit all that social democratic reformism by tying it up in that. I think there will be a mass revulsion at what's been done here, what's being done right now, and I think when the smoke clears, I think any movement for healthcare or environmental justice or whatever will be much better served by having made a principled stance and distanced themselves from the Democrats and from Israel in the wake of October 7th and this horrific genocide that we've seen.
I saw Great Society reforms undermined by Vietnam, and I hear that view for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really completely sympathetic to people that feel kind of the pressure to vote for Kamala just, out of fear of Trump, right? And, there clearly are real differences on certain issues. For one, like Donald Trump and his program, his like 20-point platform that's on his website, it's like deport pro-Hamas sympathizers, stuff like that, which is like all of us technically.
To where though? By the way, where were
so
they
things like like
so
the attack on
Oh, okay.
Gaza, they'd probably want to, honestly. But there's obviously very alarming fascistic and repressive things that are as part of the program. And so I get that people, especially who are in those positions to really suffer, women, trans people, Black people, the list goes on. I get that. And honestly, for me, it's like, I don't, maybe to kind of take a middle ground between Sean and Ryan, it's like, I don't actually care like who people pull the lever for, right? I mean, I think voting is just like an extremely passive political action. It takes however long it takes to wait in line. If there's no line, it's just like a 5-minute thing. You go, you do your thing, whatever. What I reject is the idea that people have to stop critiques of Kamala Harris or stop the demonstrations against her, or that there needs to be a kind of like falling in line of progressives or people who care about the Gaza war and so forth, that, we worry about these things after the election, that right now the biggest thing is to make sure that Trump doesn't win. And then when we have someone who's in office, who's a better person to work with, then we restart that the struggle. And that right now, if you're doing any of that, you're just helping Trump win the election. I agree with Sean that like Gaza for a lot of people is, this big red line, which of course is very legitimate, right? I mean, I think a lot of people rightfully are seeing this moment in the context of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, or in the context of slavery or the civil rights era in the United States, and thinking, what would I have done at that moment in history in that time? And this is like a similar moment in history. And so to look back and say, I cast a vote for the person that literally was in office, like doing it, and then, continued after, it's very clear that they're going to continue it. It's extremely, those people have extremely legitimate positions on a refusal to vote for Kamala on those grounds. And I think the problem is for that to be such an obvious red line for people, the DNC really made clear that it's just continuing the Biden agenda on Gaza in particular. I mean, there's lots of other things that were articulated that I think are pretty problematic we could talk about. But, Gaza is Biden's like worst issue. Like of all the issues his approval is pulled on, like his handling of Gaza is like below 30% across the board. That's worse than any other issue, and you would think that if you have someone coming in who's from that administration, the most important thing, and, Biden was doing so bad, they had to kick him out, right? So you'd think that coming from that, you would want to try to differentiate yourself in some way from not just that person, but that person's literally worst issue that they pull on nationally. And that didn't happen at all. In fact, what happened was just a reaffirmation that they're going to take the same exact line and literally say the same exact things. And even all the lines that there was some credit for about like, affirming the humanity of Palestinians and stuff, I mean, those were lifted from Blinken and Biden speeches. Also, it was also nothing new. And so, if the Democrats like lose an election over this, which is quite possible, it's like Kamala is doing quite well nationally, but there are battleground states, like because we have an extremely stupid system of the Electoral College, where this could be a thing that tanks the election. And, that will be the fault, squarely on the Democrats, not the people who, feel like morally conflicted about actually voting for them, which is an extremely justified position to have.
Let's I definitely want to stop talking about Gaza, but I wanted to touch on what you were talking about, the other positions that they articulated that you found less than satisfactory. Mike, what were you thinking about there?
Well, the opposition to the death penalty was taken out of the party program, which was interesting. It was quietly done. But then they also had, this cop speak at the DNC who is like a bad cop. He's a guy who, was caught like taking bribes for some telecommunications companies so that children couldn't visit their parents in jail, and had to talk through a, $50 an hour or $50 a minute TV screen or something like that. So kind of like a shitty guy. On immigration, which they've moved very far to the right. In fact, there is no attacks of Trump on immigration at the DNC other than, which is the biggest platform they're going to have for this entire election. I mean, even more so than the debates and stuff. I mean, the DNC speeches were it. This is the biggest national attention that they're going to have on everything. The only critiques of Trump on immigration was almost that he was like a credible voice on immigration being a problem, but he just wasn't up to handle the issue of migrants flooding into the country, and having Border Patrol people speak and things like that. Instead of like telling the truth about the shit that Trump is saying is being racist and bullshit, and this idea that all this fentanyl is coming through the border, which is not true. Most of the fentanyl is coming through legal points of entry and by Americans and things like that. So there was a real opportunity to really differentiate from an issue like that, which of course people find is very important. And then, obviously like women's healthcare, abortion is like one of the central issues of this election. In polling, obviously, it's like one of the most important things that the Democratic Party is going to have to rely on to get voters out, and could be the thing that wins them the election. But even there, it's like, I know that Harris is pro-choice, and I know that if one of those SCOTUS freaks croaks when she's president, she will appoint someone who is pro-choice to take their place. But other than that, I mean, Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't seem, I don't see much else that they're even putting forward as how they're going to secure the right of women to get abortions or people to get abortions in this country. We just have to hope that a SCOTUS fucking dies. I mean, I hope for that every day, but that's not really a great strategy. I mean, there's so many things that they could really be going hard on that shit, right? They could be talking about expanding the court, rotating people off, going after fucking Clarence Thomas, things like that. And there's also things that a president could do to make sure people have access to abortions, like using VA hospitals, opening them up to abortion providers in every single state, even where abortion is been made illegal. And let those be spaces where people can go and get abortions free from the freaks in the state preventing them. And so even on issues that I feel that there's alignment with, they're not really articulating any willingness to like kind of fight for them. And it feels like just issues being used to kind of like force people into voting.
I'll respond. Yeah, I mean, points super well taken, first of all. And I support expanding access directly to abortion in states where it's made illegal through in federal sites, just like you're talking about. I think that here in Florida, where I live, where Isaac lives, there's an amendment put together by a really great group of people. Yes on 4, Lauren Brenzel, who was a guest on my podcast, since we plugged them, Tropical Depression, patreon.com/Tropical Depression, check it out. But Amendments 3 basically decriminalizing marijuana, and 4 codifying a woman's or a constitutional right to privacy, right? It goes even further than that. It's always couched, Roe is always couched in an abortion context, which obviously is central, but there's a constitutional right to privacy that's at stake as well. I think that those are issues where there's pretty cleanly divided. Republicans are against it. Democrats are for it. Of course, we need other people too, right? We need a supermajority. We need 60% of people. And I think that's actually a really interesting, useful, productive place for us to be, for Democrats to need NPAs, for Democrats to need people who aren't just MSNBC listeners or watchers. We need normal working people. I've always thought that my whole reason for getting involved in electoral politics, to the extent that I have, is because I think that working people, everyday people, not just people who wear cufflinks and go to DNC conventions, need to be represented in the government. And in fact, they are the majority, and they should govern as a majority. So I think that where I am here, we can move the needle in a useful way with Democratic Party and Democratic elected officials. Certainly understand people who feel strongly about that. And I also really understand how certain cynical groups of professional Democrats have under-delivered on abortion rights, particularly, right? It does seem at times that there have been people who want to use abortion as a cudgel, who want to use it as a fundraising opportunity. And then, hey, when you have power, I'm super disappointed in what was not achieved during the years when we had a Democratic president and Democratic majorities in Congress. I am. I wish we had gone a lot farther. I supported a public option. I support single payer, but I certainly support a public option. And I think that was a missed opportunity. I think that, again, I don't want to be too reductive or too repetitive, but I think that when there's a Democratic president in the White House, it's like, the boot is slightly less on the neck, and voices like yours are able to break through a little bit better, as opposed to the fear, flight, or flight panic that we will certainly all be in, wondering what camp will be or what site will be deported to if Donald Trump is the president. And I hate to be lame, right? Like I hate to be a tepid harm reduction, kind of person. But what can I say? I think that the world would be a better place if Donald Trump is not the president. I know that's not a lot to hang your hat on, but I, for what it's worth, I think it's true, and I think it's importantly true.
John, were there any DNC issues or things that they said at the DNC that you liked in particular, or nothing at all?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't really watch a minute of it. I got checked out. And I mean, there are things the Democrats campaign on, but for example, card check. This is what they promised us in the Obama administration when they had 60 votes and all that, or the PRO Act, as they've reanimated it. It just feels like a lot of bait and switch in terms of unionization. And it's like, look, domestically, there are things Biden's done that I'm happy about, and yes, the union drive would be an example. But it just feels it feels like I'm cheating if I keep mentioning Gaza. But that's really what kind of solidified it for me, is these sorts of mass killing events in the 21st century. I think this is it's an extremely worrying sign that this could be the first of many, essentially. Instead of never again, we're going to have this is what life in America and Europe will be. These horrific mass killings that just become background noise because our entire system is set up to support various weapons manufacturers and these sorts of things. So, it's just a thing where, as much as there is a lot of sympathy towards social democratic reformism in my heart, I think that Gaza is just such a fundamental moral issue that I have a responsibility to try to constantly make Americans reminded and feel guilty about this, and hopefully stop it, not just feel guilty, but actually do something, because I think it just presages something so horrible in the 21st century if this is allowed to become background noise, and essentially if the Democrats are allowed to win. There's no punishment, there's no accountability at all for any of this, and I think that will just it will just push us into a very dark future where this kind of thing happens every 5 years instead of, I think this is the worst crime the United States has committed since Vietnam. Just pure mass murder of civilians without any pretense of military targets at all.
Yeah, yes. This would be a very different conversation if it wasn't for the Gaza genocide happening. And the fact that Harris is in the administration. She's
Right.
not someone just in the same party that's coming in. She's in the administration and has articulated her vision for it, which is literally just a continuation of the Biden policy. And that was made clear at the DNC. And so, yeah, that has to be considered a central issue, despite everything else that are important issues that her and Trump are very different on. And with Gaza, it is clear that the only way that there is going to be that the Harris administration, if there is one, or currently before the election or before, whoever wins takes office, because Biden's still the president. A lot of people forget. It's easy to forget. He may, not actually be, but he's still the person who's there. The only way that they will ever do what's right regards to Gaza, which is, at bare minimum, like an arms embargo. If they started bombing airfields in Israel, that would be the best thing they could do. But let's just go for a minimum demand of like an arms embargo. The only way that is going to happen is if the movement for Gaza, the Palestine Solidarity Movement, is able to create a total political crisis for them, where they are unable to function. It becomes clear that they're unable to win the election. And if they do win, they're unable to conduct any business as usual in the country unless they meet that demand. That's the only kind of language that they understand. And historically, the only time there's been concessions to a mass movement, it's when it's just been made completely untenable. And so, right now, the context of this election, yeah, I mean, it needs to be made untenable for them to have the position that they have. And at the moment, if that is part of that is saying we're going to make you lose the election if you don't come around on this, then that has to be a weapon that's wielded. And that's true for all the other things that we mentioned also, like with immigration, with criminal justice reform, with abortion, doing the right thing on abortion. I mean, that's why, I kind of started by saying like the actual day of voting is not as important to me, or not nearly as important to me as what people want to commit their time to before the election and after the election, which is building that mass movement and being a part of that struggle, doing what's necessary to build that struggle and build opposition to really these two parties that they're different on a bunch of things, and they're really the same on a lot of shit also. And, getting out of the election is always this every 4-year kind of spectacle that people's voices matter, and we want like all that shit. And it's all bullshit. I mean, they understand one language. Are they able to kind of peacefully conduct their business in Washington, their bullshit in Washington, or is there going to be this other force they have to contend with, which is like a militant mass movement that is doing the kind of things that, the Gaza movement has set the example, which needs to be taken up by the movement for abortion access, for immigration, things like that, which is shutting down all of their events, not letting them speak without being disrupted, not letting them having a fundraiser without it being disrupted, and just really like kind of shutting down business as usual in this very mass, consistent and sustained way. We need to focus on building that right now. They very much want that movement to now kind of fold into, well, Trump will be worse. Even this, this interview with AOC that just came out.
Neither party's official platform, in my opinion, is good on Palestine. I don't think either party right now is doing justice to Palestinians. That doesn't mean that they're the same. I think that a Donald Trump presidency would be absolutely catastrophic. I mean, he's coming out here saying finish the job of a genocide.
There's a lot of people with our politics that are having a hard time getting there in terms of supporting Kamala Harris. How do you think we help them get there in November to beat Trump?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, first of all, it's important to emphasize how valid it is. We're looking at over 40,000 Palestinians that have died under Israeli bombardment, and the current U.S. administration has continued to provide weapons to Israel that have been dropping on innocent Gazans. To me, when I process this, I weigh through all of the people living under extreme levels of oppression, especially outside of places even like New York. I think about the women that are bleeding out in ER rooms because they live in red states. I think about trans kids that are living in places where their entire families are trying to figure out if they need to pack up their entire lives and move somewhere else. We have to hold all of those things at once. And so to me, the conclusion that I've come to is having more people suffer to put on top of the already horrific suffering that's going on in Gaza is not something that I think I'm comfortable with.
Like yesterday or something.
Oh yeah, that was like
where she articulates it. She says Trump would finish the job, and it's like, well, you started the job. It's just like this very like, they even can't rationalize why people who care about Gaza should vote for Harris. I mean, that's
what she did that was so particularly disgusting to me was kind of like hold trans kids hostage, being like, if you don't vote for Kamala, they're gonna genocide trans kids, which is like, I'm sorry, not an equivalent. Like kids getting access to hormones and a genocide, I do not want them to be pit against each other, because like morally there's a right and wrong answer in that, unfortunately. And so I'm appalled by what they hold hostage and then call you transphobic or racist or whatever for saying, well, no, like this is what's important to me. Like this is where I draw this particular line. And
I also don't believe any of it. It's like
it's
anything
bullshit. It's
good,
bullshit.
anything that a politician who is campaigning, anything they say that I like, I no longer believe that that's not going to happen if they get elected. Because there's always an excuse. And then it's like, it's how the sausage is made. Like, yes, I wanted to do this, but that I had to do this to bargain for this. And it's just like, it just becomes this bullshit where I don't, if all the things in the program that I like, well, actually there's no program. There's no as of now, there's nothing on the Harris Walz website.
Yeah.
It's just their bios, which
Yeah.
is like very emblematic of this election. You go to their website and here's the about page for Harris and for Walz, and so it's just about who they are as people and their vibes and everything. There's no program like Donald Trump has, but of the things that they say they are for, even the things I like, I don't believe that they're actually going to do any of that shit. So like with protecting trans kids, that's very important to me. I think that's very important. I don't think we should have to choose between that or a genocide, but I also don't believe that they're actually going to do anything, absent them being forced to do something, which is where our energy should be, I think.
I think keeping right-wing Republicans out of power is an important political goal. And I am for voting, but of course I'm not just for voting. I think that building a mass movement is super important. I think that we're not going anywhere without that. And I think that labor and working people has to be at the middle of it. I think that anti-war protest movements is really important to me personally. And I think important, vital now more than ever. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't support just voting. I support doing more beyond that, and I do think that unfortunately, the Supreme Court composition. I would go further there too. I'm for right now. We have a Supreme Court that's so far out of step. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. There is a capture that people have pointed to of our politics, not really so much divided evenly between the parties, but a thin ribbon of the very richest and most powerful people. And I absolutely oppose it. I find it obnoxious that some people make a fantasy land out there where these horrible atrocities aren't happening, and I find myself sickened by it like you do. And I also find it to get back to re-horseshoe the horseshoe. I do find that the uniparty, the national security blob has been way too influential in Democratic administrations. Of course, Republican administrations too. And I do wonder sometimes how people think that Donald Trump would be prosecuting this war. But yeah, no, I mean, points really well taken. And again, I think that that's something that we agree on more than we disagree on.
Well, you were asking earlier, what do I agree with the Democrats on? Well, if you go back and watch Bill Clinton's campaign speeches from 1992, well, I agree with most of the things he said there. But then every single 4 years since then, they've just been running on the same program of revitalizing the middle class. Meanwhile, Clinton's the one who signs PNTR with China, which destroys manufacturing. And like all of these kind of contractions, it's just been a 40-year decline from the Reagan era, and every 4 years we get the same platitudes about running again, and money has just become so much more important and powerful, particularly since Citizens United. But or even just to keep going with Israel, I mean, Harris's position on Israel is to the right of Ronald Reagan, to the right of George W. Bush. I mean, she won't even, on the DNC, she wouldn't even explicitly recognize a Palestinian state. She talks about self-determination. This is George W. Bush recognized, or he stated that he would recognize support for an independent Palestinian state publicly. And so it's just money, we just have such a managed democracy at this point. Money has become so powerful that even when a majority of people in this country support a ceasefire, you don't have any of the two major parties, or even before RFK Jr. dropped out, the main third party option. You just have no option to actually vote for large questions are completely removed from democratic accountability in this country, particularly foreign policy. So, I think everybody should sort of look at their own local elections and do their own research. I don't discourage people from voting. It's just you kind of have to be honest about this system. It's authoritarian democracy, managed democracy, inverted totalitarianism, whatever you want to call it. But elections here don't actually decide much, as has been evidenced by going back and looking at what Bill Clinton was running on, and all of those same problems exist still and have gotten worse.
Yeah, so I feel like being in Florida, which is at least in the last election cycle, deep red. I mean, Ron DeSantis, who is we should talk a little bit about Ron DeSantis as a kind of interesting figure in the Republican Party, and what happens when you let Republicans take full control of an executive branch. But I feel like I have the luxury of not having to vote for Kamala because my vote doesn't matter like that here. Although, Ryan, you could maybe make the case in a second that actually, like, Florida's more purple now than it once was.
I think Harris will win Florida.
You think Harris will win Florida? Fuck you, dude. Don't say that.
Yes.
If you vote for her, Isaac,
I
That's
think
up to
that
me. If
Kamala
I
people
Harris
like you
will
vote for
win
her.
Florida.
one vote.
I think that Donald Trump's campaign is looking like shit. He's in a death spiral, and I think that Kamala Harris will win Florida.
That would be crazy. That would be such a wild 180 for this state. But again, I guess to follow what Sean was saying is there have been no consequences for the Democratic apparatus having really never followed through with anything that they promised us. And yet we keep, I know it's trite now, but Lucy in the football, we keep saying, okay, this time, because the stakes are higher. This is the most important election of our lifetime. And I'm just fucking sick of it. And for me, it felt like I could vote principally instead of politically. That, like, as on principle, like Sean was saying, it's a red line for me, this fucking genocide in Gaza. Like, I don't see how I can possibly even bubble a box in there, at the very least. If I'm not going to pull a fucking Aaron Bushnell and burn myself, the least I can do is not vote for this fucking genocidal administration. So, and it's not like I'm happy with the other things they're doing. The Biden administration is to the right of the Trump administration on immigration. They are literally violating international law and our own laws when it comes to like banning asylum seekers. I remember right away in 2020, one of the first things, or one of the convincing, quote unquote, convincing arguments for voting for Biden in 2020 over Trump was the environment, right? Trump was going to expedite climate change, climate catastrophe. And what was one of the first things that Biden did under Debbie Haaland, the Native American Interior Secretary? They gave away a record number of land in the Gulf of Mexico to oil drilling, like way more than the Trump administration gave. So when stuff like that happens, it's like, what? Why bother? Like, I want this to crash and burn in a way, or I don't know. I don't want to be a fucking accelerationist and that nonsense necessarily, but yeah, I don't know what the best move to do would be.
Well, I'm deeply bothered by the ratchet effect too, right? It seems like things only seem to go one way, and I'll tell you this. I mean, Ron DeSantis in Florida is an interesting case. Clearly, we are enough of a threat for Ron DeSantis to bother. I just got out of being toe to toe with the DeSantis administration in the school board race here in Leon County. All the King's horses, all the King's men were mobilized on a little tiny districted school board race. They were able to eke out a win with an incumbent that had 4 times the money versus our candidate by 700 votes. It was brutal. It was ugly. It was completely crazy. I don't think that they would be fighting us if everything was exactly the same if we would have won.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, look, the kind of stuff you're doing, like local level stuff too, it's like I obviously can see that you can see much more results with that, and there's big differences you can make on the ground doing those kinds of things. In terms of like a national election, it's like you bringing up climate, Isaac. It's like that's another thing that was basically absent from the DMC. There was no substantive discussion of the climate emergency, like whatsoever, at the DNC. And this is another one of these, of course, Gaza right now overshadows something like this because it's just such an immediate horror. But climate crisis is, that's the current film project I'm working on right now is about the climate crisis and had the role that the U.S. militarism plays in it. And it's like really scary shit. I mean, it's obviously too much to get into, but everyone should be very scared about what the future is going to look like, in our lifetimes, and definitely our children or people who would be our children's age if you don't have children. It's a very chaotic and scary world that's coming. And for in this historic moment on that issue in particular, there being the party that's supposed to be the one that's going to do the right thing on this, for there to be no discussion or articulation of a program whatsoever. And then the record, Isaac, like you mentioned, that that's tough. I mean, it brings me back to you asked if I voted, last time I voted for Democrat, right? It's like 2004, I was into Kerry. I was into Kerry because the most important issue to me was the Iraq War, and I wanted the Iraq War to end. And Kerry had this kind of anti-war veteran credential who was going to undo the wrongs that Bush had done in Iraq. But I very quickly saw, especially once he became Secretary of State and things like that, that Kerry would not have done anything good in regard to the Iraq War. It was all just this ruse, and it was this thing that was making me have some kind of hope in a political system that, if we just get this guy who says the things that I like about this issue, then things will turn around. And it was that was kind of the first step of realization where I was faced with, the election as the means through which I could struggle to end the war, but then finding the anti-war struggle and then realizing that we had immense power in unity and multinational and labor organizing and things like that. And then it kind of opened me up to understand that it's there's little daylight between Trump and Harris on things like foreign policy, right? And that's because the United States is, we're an imperialist country. We're a military empire. We have by far the biggest military. Than, our Air Force is bigger than the next 7 biggest air forces combined. We're the only country that has not just more than 20 overseas bases, but has around 1,000 overseas bases. I mean, this is unacknowledged reality of this American project, is that our country is only our country because of this massive military expanse that dictates the lives of so many people around the world. And then whoever is in the job of the president, it's really, that they defer to the Pentagon on this shit. I mean, Trump got elected on all of this anti-deep state, anti-war rhetoric and shit like that. A lot of pro-war rhetoric also, but as soon as he got in, it was just basically the Joint Chiefs that were telling him no, this is what you gotta do. And so that's kind of the situation we're in. And so for me, it just became I can't participate in this anymore. It's obvious what this is. The political system is just kind of this front for something that's just much more devious, and that I can't really participate in it. Not to denigrate people who do, because I respect that, and I think there are important issues that people fight on within the system that we see results on. But when it comes to a national election, especially this one, right? I mean, Kamala is very lucky that Trump is her opponent right now because she's doing so bad. He is in a death spiral. He's got no more fucking juice anymore. His tweets suck. He used to be, he used to have something 10 years ago, and just in terms of being able to dunk on people and make political points. Now they're just sucking right now really bad. And it's still a close election. It's a close election. Yeah. And then we have Kamala Harris who, dropped out of the primary in 2020 because she was doing worse than Tulsi Gabbard, which is pretty embarrassing. And then she's the nominee without a primary again. And so it's
democracy.
I mean, there's an alternate timeline where Tulsi would be the nominee now. If she just stayed generic Democrat when she started out, I mean, she could have very easily been the VP and now the pick without ever having to win a primary and stuff. And so, it's just very uninspiring. And then I even think that the approach to the DNC of just making them relatable and cool to Gen Z and millennials was just very obvious. And when you really looked at the substance there, it was kind of bad. It's a bad political program. And it just feels a little gross. And then that's without Gaza. I mean, it's this would be all an issue if it wasn't also for the fact that this is the party that's in charge of a genocide, at the helm of a genocide, and is not just the most that they have been willing to offer. That demand is for them to just put in a couple nice words in the DNC speeches to say that, oh yes, we also see Palestinians as human.
Yeah, the climate catastrophe, the upcoming climate catastrophe. It feels like the way that Democrats are handling Gaza is practice for the brutalism of all of the crises that we're going to face with climate. So it I don't know. Her speech kind of freaked me out a little bit. The way she was talking, especially when that whole most lethal army comment, that's when she seemed.
Yeah, I think we got that one covered.
Yeah, yeah, no, right.
I'm worried myself about whether the button does anything anymore, right? Whether it's just that close elevator button that doesn't have any functionality. Seriously, I wonder about it all the time. I know here in my work, we're really materially getting after whether our city, Tallahassee, which is a crucial place, a critically, materially, and politically important place within a really important state, whether we continue to build, borrow hundreds of millions of dollars and build sprawl roads, environmentally destructive, exurb bedroom communities, cookie cutter places for rich people, and continue to republicanize our area and dilute the culture and tradition and remove ourselves from our territory here and dilute the meaning of our community, or whether we continue to build up and create more dense development and do the kind of things where these conversations can flourish, right? Right, where a place where at least there's some place where there's a community here where we care about each other and we can build from. But yeah, I gotta be honest with you. I got into all this because I was not very pleased with the level of responsiveness between the demands and the desires of the average person and the political apparatus, and that's what I'm working towards. And I share a lot of your frustrations. And if you ask the average establishment consultant class kind of Democrat, they would be disappointed in me too. So,
Well, not that I would never vote for Donald Trump, not even as a joke. But there is an interesting case. Like sometimes accelerationism can be a little convincing to me that you gotta hit rock bottom before you can bounce back up. And I do think that Florida might be an example of accelerationism. I think that Ron DeSantis's wholesale takeover of the political apparatus in the state of Florida and being able to pass everything he wanted to pass without any resistance, and his, I think, historic fall from grace. I've never seen someone eat shit so hard after being on such a fucking high.
zero
And
county is 1 out of 99 in Iowa. It gets me every time. It's amazing.
um, and so what you're seeing now, especially these recent primary votes in Florida, is a wholesale rejection of this DeSantis like extreme right wing. I mean, when it came down, when it looked like it was going to be between DeSantis and Trump, I was like, I'm voting for Trump. I'm voting for Trump because DeSantis is like that bad to me. If you want to talk about somebody who is like an actual tool of the Zionist occupied government, Ron DeSantis has terrifying ties to Israel, like even scarier than Trump, in my opinion. But he's done. It seems like it's done. The project is over. DeSantis, the same people who wrote up Project 2025 are the same people who, made Florida the free state. And we're seeing, again, a local wholesale rejection of these policies. Now, who knows what it's going to look like come November in the general election when you have people. But in that case, I mean, I don't know if it's a worst case scenario. DeSantis has done untold amounts of damage to the state of Florida that we might not ever quite bounce back from, including completely destroying Ryan's alma mater and New College of Florida. But it might not be the worst case scenario in Florida. If you really think it's going to go blue, maybe it's a case for letting Trump win and the Democratic Party having to reinvent itself.
I may just be a simple country municipal bureaucrat, but even I know that nothing good will happen if Donald Trump is returned to the White House. And again, I understand that's kind of operating in a negative space. I understand that isn't the most inspiring thing of all time, but I do think it's a start. I do think it's importantly true. I do think that we can't, especially after the Chevron decision, we can't allow these people to get their clutches around the federal bureaucracy and around the Supreme Court even more. I certainly think that the Democratic Party needs to do better. I'm trying to be a part of that. I respect those who decide to intervene in other ways. I think that there are important ways in which we can work together. And I'm, committed to the idea that certainly Harris being the president, not Donald Trump, is a thing that would make the world a better place and all of our lives better. And I think that you're right, Isaac. The state government of Florida, look, a lot of people have seen Florida historically as a sideshow or this aberration, this weird place. But, you and I, Isaac, have always known that Florida is America, but more so. We're just further down the road from where America's politics is otherwise. And it's not pretty. The Democratic Party, with its many, many flaws, and God knows there are many. Um, Many unforgivable things have been done by Democratic elected officials. I do think that is a vehicle for mass political participation that is available in every community. Others aren't. I think in other places where it makes sense to vote for a working families party or a farm and labor party or something else, I think that I respect people who do that. I think that here where I am, it makes a lot of sense to have like-minded people be influential and within the life of the Democratic Party. And so that's what I'm doing. But I hear loud and clear many others who feel differently.
Yeah, no, you make a great case, Ryan. I don't know. I feel like I see this the poisoning of pragmatism in a lot of ways. Mike, you have a congresswoman to your north in Vancouver, Washington, who was a former roommate of mine, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. She lived on my couch, dude, in college. And I know her personally. I mean, I haven't known her in a decade or so. Um, but she, if I've talked about on my show before, she is this blue dog Democrat. She's beautiful. She's a beautiful woman, and she's fairly charismatic for a politician, I guess. But she has taken these incredibly right-wing positions as a Democrat in Congress, and she also was busted for not busted, but it was revealed that she has accepted something like $300,000 from AIPAC for this like tiny seat in Congress in Southern Washington. And it's like, why? What's the point of that? Why would they give her $300,000? I don't think that the people of Vancouver, Washington give much of a fuck about what's going on in Israel. And the argument I see, because she won't take my calls anymore. Smart, good job. Um, is because I think that abortion is one of her big policies that she wants to I think fight for. And so she will sacrifice everything else for the pragmatism of supposedly being able to save abortion in Congress. And I don't know. At what point is it just too far? At what point are we, by voting for these people, upholding this institution that has not delivered? And the promise of deliverance is there, I suppose, relative to someone like Trump, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can. Your mileage may vary with local elections, but in terms of the national party or the national political system now, foreign policy has been completely removed from the electoral process. Mm-hmm. I would say that goes back to the JFK assassination and Watergate, but really after 9/11, I mean, the United States has been in a federal state of emergency ever since 9/11. The president renews it every year. And Peter Dale Scott actually contacted his congressman out in California. And there was a law passed after Nixon which says that for there to be a federal state of emergency, the Congress has to actually review it and renew it, and they must do this every year. And it actually has not happened once since 9/11, and Peter Dale Scott contacted his congressman, and what they were told was essentially whatever they did after September 11th, they put some classified executive orders in under George W. Bush, which Obama upheld. We don't even know what those say, but for whatever reason, the law as written with regards to the state of emergency has been superseded by executive order, by the imperial presidency. And this is the same authority with which Obama was able to assassinate a U.S. citizen and essentially tell the courts to go fuck themselves. So, at some point you just hit this... when foreign policy has just been completely outsourced from the public to, the military, the State Department, the CIA, etc. Well, okay, there's that, but then what about domestic policy? Well, domestic policy, of course, Obama bailed out the banks, we all remember. I mean, it doesn't matter if you vote Democrat or Republican, you get a Treasury Secretary from Goldman Sachs, or Trump has promised to change this by appointing someone by JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. But it's like, So okay, the economy, the commanding heights of the economy, doesn't matter which of the two parties you vote for nationally. It's going to be Goldman Sachs. It's going to be Wall Street. It'll be Chase. Foreign policy doesn't really matter. It's going to be CIA policy. So at some point, like, what are you left to vote on? Abortion is important. Trans issues are important. They do matter. But nationally, you just don't get any input into the two biggest questions. And I think at some point, like, you need an actual opposition. Like, as much as it would suck for a lot of people if Trump comes back. I mean, at some point you need a real opposition. Otherwise, it's just kind of worse to have these people you think are your allies who are very much the opposite.
Yeah, and reforms can be won under right-wing administrations also. I mean, I don't think it's just like for the mass movement to be successful, there has to be a Democrat in office. I mean, I think that if a mass movement is strong enough, they can win reforms and concessions, no matter who is in office. Of course, a country ruled by Donald Trump, looks a lot darker in many ways than one ruled by Harris. I mean, we've seen it a little bit. We've seen 4 years of it, and not just through policy, but there was surges of like right-wing political violence and stuff under Trump as well, which of course are really concerning. But I just think that for those of us who consider ourselves on the left or anti-war or anti-imperialist, we have a job, and that's to fight who's in power, right? And not make temporary alliances with them that have never proven to pay off for people in our position at all. And so our focus is how do we challenge power in a way that forces them to do the things that are necessary. And that's our job. It's the Democratic Party's job to make sure Trump doesn't get in office. I mean, they're running a multi-billion-dollar election operation. All right, I think that they have the responsibility of defeating Trump. They could put a lot of people on staff to do phone banking and door knocking and all the things they need to do. People who have our views, considered radical views in America, even though most people support a ceasefire, a real permanent ceasefire in Gaza and things like that. We're just such a minority when it comes to the real electorate, right? I mean, I really like how Michael Moore put it in Fahrenheit 11/9, that like the biggest political party in America is non-voters. I mean, there are so many people in this country who are just not engaged in the political process at all because it doesn't speak to them. And, those are people that can be reached by the Democratic Party in this multi-billion-dollar voter turnout machine. I mean, that's really what it functions as in times like this. It's just a voter turnout machine. There's tons of people that you could be appealing to and getting to vote. It's not our responsibility as people on the left to be doing that. The DNC was concerning because it seemed like they were trying to win over Trump voters and Republican Party people instead of trying to reach all of these people that just don't vote in elections at all. But yeah, I mean, that's, if Harris loses to Trump, I will not feel in any way responsible, even if it's, I'm voting for Claudia De La Cruz and Karina Garcia. I mean, they're on the ballot in a bunch of swing states. If they're the spoiler and I was campaigning for them and Trump wins by 100 votes in one of these states, I won't feel guilty about that at all. That would be on the fault of the Democratic Party for actually failing to get more votes of all these people who don't vote at all or don't feel spoken to by the party or this political system.
I will strongly agree with you that I don't expect people to fall in line. I think that it's the Democratic Party's job and it's these top of the ticket huge campaigns' responsibility to make people vote. You're supposed to attract them. I've always disagreed with this "how dare you" not a vote for us approach that some people have taken. I'll say, for instance, I put a lot of blame and a lot of responsibility on Donald Trump, on Hillary Clinton, for her malpractice and losing Pennsylvania for the first time since 1984. I've never agreed with this blaming the voters and blaming everyday people. I think that people have more power, more money, more responsibility, bear more of the onus for this. I totally agree with you on that. It reminds me of the Bertolt Brecht poem, about I'm disappointed in the people and we should dissolve them and elect another one. No, it's their job to entice people and create a sort of political program that invites people to vote for you. And I think that your record is a huge part of that. And we've got to do a better job of not. And I don't think that some people say, hey, well, really a lot of amazing things are happening. I think that we just need to communicate those better. Well, it's true, I guess, to an extent. But I think that the Democratic Party has to align its values more with working class people. I think a labor and working class movement has to be at the center of anything that's built to win against the Republicans and the incredible, terrifying right-wing machinery that's growing and being deployed as we speak right now. And I am not one who's going to shame people. I'm not going to yell at Ralph Nader voters. I don't think that those are the people who bear the responsibility. I think in as much as there is a disconnect between regular people that just are living their lives and work and the Democratic Party, I think that more responsibility falls on the party, and they've got to do a better job of aligning themselves and being less captured by the same right-wing special interests that have fully captured the Republican Party.
Yeah, it has been fun watching the mass exodus of Silicon Valley VC jumping on the Trump train, and now probably wishing they could jump back off because it ain't working out the way they thought. Really, whatever like Silicon Valley says is going to happen, it's the opposite. I think that's why I'm quite confident Harris is going to win because Elon endorsed Trump, and that's just the kiss of fucking death. So I think we're gonna have some final statements here, and then I'll tell you guys who I'm gonna vote for by the end of it. Sean, you want to start?
Yeah, my final statement is just check the line at your local polling station, and I would recommend if it's less than 15 minutes, the pen is worth it, and you can throw the stickers out, but I would spend 15 minutes in line for that pen, and I would probably vote Green Party if I was there.
Mike?
You can vote socialist this election in over 20 states. That's what I'll be doing. I encourage you to. And Florida, they'll be on the ballot. Actually, there's a legal challenge happening, but most likely will be on the ballot in Florida for you to vote for. And someone whose views you are completely aligned with. And so, vote your conscience, and then let the billions of dollars in the Democratic Party, worry about the rest of the people.
Brian?
If you're in line, stay in line. I think it's important civic duty, especially in Florida, to go to the library, go to the SOE, go wherever, and vote to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't retake the White House. I think that will make our country much worse. I think that it's okay to vote for Kamala Harris in a critical way. In fact, I think you should. I certainly am not complacent, and I'm not happy with where the party is or where the state of our national politics is. But I do think that there is a wider path to a vision that works for the people if we have a Democratic president in the White House. I share a lot of frustrations. In many ways, those frustrations have animated my whole life. But I do think that it's important, I think, especially if you live in a place that is strategic, to go vote for Vice President Harris. A vibes-based candidacy and a vibes-based administration is probably better than what you get otherwise. I understand how meager that can sound, but I think that little bit of room can be the breathing room between certain tragedy and at least the promise of something better. So I understand a lot of people feeling Charlie Brown footballed with their disappointment in the Democratic Party. I think that you'd be surprised how much in common I have with that view. But I do think that Harris is going to win. And I think that that is a place where people of good faith and people of conscience can get a foothold at least and begin to work towards something good.
Yeah, the main argument for voting for Harris is it would be really funny if the deep state tried and failed to assassinate Trump, and then he just lost the election anyways.
And it's it's just also very Veep, if you've been a fan of the show, it's such a Veep presidency. But yeah, and if you're one of the people that agrees with Ryan, like I said at the beginning, I get that. I'm not there, but I get it. And I just encourage people who, if you feel that that's where you lie, I mean, do your 15 minutes in line or however long in line it is, and join demonstrations when they're happening, get involved in grassroots political organizations, those who are doing kind of the militant fight back, which I think is the real lever of change in this country.
Yeah, once college classes start back up, I'll be very curious to see if the protests continue, or if they've managed to threaten these kids in such ways that they're not going to do that. But that was very encouraging when that was happening, actually. I, after this very informative conversation, have decided to vote for a compromise candidate. He like Harris, he's a Hindutva, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Vivek, please come here. Vivek Ramaswamy.
That's who I'm going to write in as the compromise candidate between all that. No, I vote. I'm a fucking nerd when it comes to voting. I just voted for 3 different charter board districts. So like, I believe in it. It's the least you could do. But yeah, I wonder what will finally break this this circle that I find myself in, where there's this constant disappointment. So I don't know if voting or not voting is going to change that, but I do think that talking about it can be pretty fun. So thank you guys for being on the show. Quickly plug whatever you want people to check out after they listen to this. Yeah.
Well, my ass is on the line, and I shed my cards, and I still don't want to know who you're going to vote for, Isaac. However, if you are interested in helping the project that I'm working on, please consider giving to the Leon County Democratic Party. It has advantages and is way more war crime free than other Democratic parties. So go to the Leon County Democratic Party, give me a try. And also, I'll be returning shortly after a brief electoral break from Tropical Depression. We have some really exciting guests coming up soon. Tropical Depression on Patreon, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that stuff. And it's really good talking with y'all.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me. SeanPMcCarthy.substack.com, patreon.com/outforsmokes. We got a free episode and a $5 a month paid episode every week. You can subscribe to the Patreon without paying. Patreon.com/outforsmokes.
Yeah, for me, it's Empire Files on everything: YouTube, podcast, Patreon, Substack, Twitter, Instagram. Just search Empire Files, you'll find it. Our first film is there too on the YouTube. I also have a show called Eyes Left, which is an anti-war veterans podcast. You can find it on all podcast platforms as well. And then if you want to find out about the new film I'm working on, go to earthsgreatestenemy.com.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. All right, Sean, you wanted to say one more thing?
I was just going to say the Gaza movie you did is incredible. So I'm glad I got a chance to say that. It was very powerful.
Oh, good shit. Thank you.
All right, guys. Talk to you soon.
Tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Not for them a judge or jury, or indeed a crime at all. Being Irish means they're guilty, so they're guilty one and all. Round the world the truth will echo, Cromwell's men are here again. England's name again is sullied in the eyes of honest men. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Proudly march behind our banner, proudly march behind our men. We will have them free to help us build a nation once again. On the people step together, proudly marching on your way. Never fear or never falter, till the boys come home to stay. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire.